Welcome. Thanks everyone that's signing on. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. You will need to change it to host and panelists so that everyone can see you, or to everyone, sorry, that you can go ahead and introduce yourself. That would be great. We'd love to hear where you're coming from. And we are going to kick off in just one moment. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Really looking forward to this conversation. Hi, Peter. Hey, Dan. Nice to see you. Oh, hi, Arjun. Good to see you here too. All right. It looks like we may not have the chat enabled for participants. I am seeing that we have not done that, so I apologize. So there, I would say feel free to start thinking of questions to put in the Q&A, because that is the way that you're going to be able to engage with this. All right. Oh, we can now talk to everyone in the chat. Oh, there we go. They fixed it live. Annabelle, that is pretty impressive. All right. So now you can introduce yourself on the chat. Just make sure and change it. Hey, Dan. Make sure and change it to everyone. And then if you can just put you've got your name, but you put where you're calling in from and why you've joined us today. So that would be great. Hi, Solomon. Nice to have you here. Excellent. So let's get going while a few more people come in. I am super pleased to be able to host this conversation today with Ravit. I will be introducing her in just a moment. This conversation is part of the webinar series for the Impact Finance courses, which are a set of courses at the University of Oxford Said Business School that are open executive education courses. So we run these courses throughout the year, and historically during COVID, they were online and they are going back to in person. So we'll be running the Oxford Impact Finance Innovations course, which we'll talk a little bit more about in late October. And I'm the program director of that course. I specialize in impact finance and particularly innovative financial structuring. And I've had a focus on tech myself for the past 5 years in this, and as part of our course and part of my work is thinking about how to use tech to be able to enable better allocation of financial resources. So with that, I am going to introduce Ravit, who is joining us. Ravit is an AI ethics advisor, researcher, and speaker for startups and investors. She helps startups and investors to develop AI ethics strategies to be responsible investors. She's currently heading efforts to build and implement responsible AI strategies at Bria, which generates synthetic images. She also serves as the VP of Responsible AI and Mission Control, a company on a mission to make AI ethics more practical and scalable. Ravit holds a PhD in philosophy from the University of California, Berkeley, where she served as a research and learning facilitator. She was also a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pittsburgh. She did not originally start out in AI ethics, but she uncovered her passion for it while she was doing her doctorate. And she's specifically thinking about the question about how to manage the role that values play in machine learning. Some of her secondary areas of interest are feminist philosophy and the philosophy of religion. On top of many accolades and contributions to the field, Ravit regularly lends her voice and wealth of knowledge to this topic on podcasts and webinars such as this, and LinkedIn posts that break down all things AI ethics. So Ravit, we are so happy you are here. I'm going to hand it over to you to talk a little bit about what it means to be an ethical impact investor.
Hi. Yeah, thank you for this lovely introduction and everyone who came in today and who also commented in the chat. It's really exciting to see the diversity of people and geography that we have. So I'm super excited for this. And I guess without further ado, I will share my screen. and hopefully it will work. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Do you see my screen? Okay. Okay. Yeah, so today I'm here to talk about this topic, AI ethics, and it's funny with a title like AI ethics, because of the word ethics, some people say, this is not really relevant for investors. The word ethics reminds me of Plato, right? So this is the kind of thing that I hear, but actually it is really relevant for investors, especially impact investors, and that's what I want to talk about today. But first, I should introduce myself. Yeah, I guess I decided to make it my professional goal to make all AI responsible. And to do that, I have decided to work in 3 sectors at the same time. So I work in the private sector, in the academic sector, and in the nonprofit sector. All my work basically revolves around how do we take talk of AI ethics and turn it into action. So whether it's companies, so startups or enterprises, or investors, how do we take those concepts and act on them? So I hold a number of positions in those 3 domains. And, as Ani said, my background is in philosophy, from which I pivoted into this AI ethics domain. So here's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm just going to give a bit of background because I'm not assuming any kind of previous knowledge. Then I am going to talk a little bit about what is AI ethics, again, not assuming any knowledge about it. Then I'm going to say how AI ethics is relevant for investors. And then I'm going to talk about, okay, what can investors actually do? How do we move it to action? And I'm going to focus on what investors can do in their due diligence process. So let's start with just a bit of background. What is AI? It's a tricky thing to say because it really depends on who you ask. So I'm going with this research that mapped different kind of definitions. And basically what they found is that policymakers often think of AI as an algorithm that either thinks like a human or behaves like a human. And computer scientists often think of AI as an algorithm that either kind of thinks rationally or behaves rationally. So that's kind of the ballpark of what we have in mind. And when we talk about AI, there's so many media about it, movies, TV shows. So I think a lot of people, we tend to have this concept of AI is like a very futuristic thing. It's going to take over the world, like, so, flying cars. And yes, maybe one day, but it's important to know that actually it's much more mundane. So when we look at the use cases for AI today, it's mostly in back office. This is a survey from this year, 2022. Mostly, it's automation of IT processes, call centers, threat detection. These are things that are, many companies are dealing with. And perhaps because of that, we're really seeing a huge boom in AI. It's not a niche thing. Actually, it's really likely that in the near future, probably, the vast majority, if not all tech companies, are going to have AI. So we're seeing, different surveys indicate different things. But this survey by IBM said that only 20% of companies didn't plan to use AI. And this survey from PwC last year, just 5% of the companies didn't already use or experiment with AI. And this is very notable because the year prior to that, 2020, it was 47%. So we're seeing a huge jump. Yeah, apparently the pandemic really accelerated the adoption of AI. So this is happening. So it's not this niche futuristic thing. It's something that's really taking over the industry. And also we're seeing this increase in the investment world. So this is a study by the OECD. So they showed, this is the VC investment in AI. So 2020, it was 21% of all AI, of all VC investment, a huge increase from just 2012, where it was 3%. Also, a report by the Stanford showed the same trend in global corporate investment. So you see that in 2021, all global corporate investment was $176 billion US, huge increase from 2013 when it was only 5.23. So we're seeing this boom not only in the industry of AI, but also in the investment world. This is happening. We should be thinking about this. Which brings us to AI ethics. What is that thing? So just like with AI, there are many definitions of AI ethics, but since this is my talk, I will give you my definition. I think of AI ethics as a field, as a discipline. We have chemistry, we have physics, we have AI ethics. And what this field is aiming to do is both understand and manage how AI impacts the world. So AI, both risks and opportunities, like the bad that it could do, the good that it could do to people, to society, to the environment. This is what AI ethics is to me. And so what are those risks and opportunities? Many examples. Let's take the US Sustainable Development Goals. Really interesting paper that argued that, so the UN Sustainable Development Goals are divided to specific targets. 79% of those targets, AI can help us promote. So this can be a really, really powerful tool to promote the kind of positive changes we want to see in the world. Of course, if we do it in the wrong way, it can cause a lot of harm, like any technology. And I divide those harms to three kinds: harms to people, to society, to the environment. And we've already seen many of those in the news when it comes to people, a lot of violations of privacy, wrongful discrimination, so many headlines on this, so I'm not gonna linger on them. Society, we've seen spread of misinformation, we've seen, threats to democracy. These are huge threats. I'm going to emphasize the environmental impact because there has been less awareness for this, but actually AI algorithms can have really high carbon emissions. So for example, this study that I'm citing here found that the carbon emissions of one language processing model of an advanced one, well, advanced, it was like 2020, so now we have others. But the carbon emissions of that one algorithm is actually twice the carbon emissions over the life of one average American person. So it can be really high. Now come the investors. You might think, what is all of this? I'm an investor, like, why should I think about this at all? Two reasons. One, social and environmental impact. So especially people who are impact investors already aware of the importance of thinking about those issues when we invest. AI ethics is one of those issues. Even if you're not an impact investor, even if you're thinking just of ESG, still, this should be a part of ESG too. And in my mind, it should be a part of all investments, whether ESG or impact investors or not. But even if you're thinking only, some people say, I have a fiduciary duty, like I can't just do that. I say fine, but this thing also has an impact on materiality, which some people, don't initially realize. So I just want to emphasize, here are 5 reasons why AI ethics is actually really important for materiality. One is compliance, and I'll start with that because we are at the cusp of a game-changing, regulation. That is a law called the EU AI Act. So that is the most prominent effort to regulate AI. So the European Union is currently formulating a law to regulate all AI in the EU. Similarly to GDPR, it is very I will not at all be surprised if it will have the same kind of impact where, like, yes, it's for the EU, but actually now it's changing the landscape in the entire world, because like, who doesn't want to do business with the EU? In addition to very salient, regional efforts, we are seeing there are laws that are already in place. China already has an AI law. In the US, for example, many states already have AI laws. So it's AI specific laws are already here. More of them are coming. And don't forget that the entirety of the legal system we have, AI is already subject to that too. So when we're thinking privacy laws, when we're thinking non-discrimination laws, so people are increasingly using that to restrict and penalize companies. So we really should be thinking about compliance when it comes to AI, and AI ethics helps with that, but does not end with compliance. Another really important thing that AI ethics helps with is the quality of the product. So we're seeing a lot of surveys of business leaders saying themselves that they are convinced that actually, if you do AI responsibly, your product is just going to be better. There are many reasons for that, but basically it's when you do AI responsibly, you think things more thoroughly. You make sure your product is more suited to a broader, range of user profiles. And so it's just better at the end. Product adoption. There's a really interesting survey. Now it's escaping me who ran that survey. But anyway, people refuse to work with AI vendors if they have ethical concerns. And so the survey that, of course, now escapes me who ran that survey, but I think it was one of the big four, that 60% of people in the survey said that their company has already turned down an AI vendor because of AI ethics concerns. So this is not like theoretical. They have already done that, 60%. And 75% said that they would if that happened. And we have similar indications from private consumers indicating that responsible AI leads to greater engagement, buying more products, greater product loyalty. So AI ethics is important for adoption as well. Talent attraction. So I think it's well known that the younger generation, for them, it's really important, this ethical aspect, but actually it's true for all age categories. So people rank ethical leadership as one of their top 2 categories or across all age groups. And I can send those links later to Ani so that all those links could be available later. And then I will remember who exactly said what. But anyway, yeah, and we've seen an interesting manifestation of this talent attraction thing after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, when the job offers that Facebook gave to people, usually their acceptance rate was 85%. It dropped to 35 to 55%. So we're seeing this in practice, and the effect was even more stark among the engineers. And also the recruiters say that after the scandal, they got much tougher questions about privacy from job candidates. So this is affecting talent attraction as well. And last but not least, reputation. We've all seen headlines about various companies. No one wants that about their company. And it's interesting to mention that it can bite back the investor as well. For example, there was a case where Microsoft invested in a company called AnyVision. They had a scandal. Microsoft as an investor was shamed as well, ended up needing to divest from them. So why should investors prioritize AI ethics? Because of the social and environmental impacts and because of materiality. Okay, so of course, you're all convinced now, all investors instantaneously are going to do this. So the question is, what can investors do? There's a lot that they can do. I divided to 3. So there are things that you can do before the investment, after the investment, and you can also tie it into your fund development. So if you're thinking pre-investment, there's a screening, due diligence. You can include it in your valuations, in your term sheets, various kind of things. But it's also important to do things after the investment. So just like the investor helps the company grow in many other aspects of the business, it can also help the company grow in terms of AI ethics. It can give it support, access to resources, to training, to experts. It can provide accountability by monitoring the progress. And when we're thinking of the fund development, if I'm thinking specifically VC, can include it in your engagement with the LPs, can include it in your fund thesis, and think of the training that your investment team is having. But today, of all of these, I'm going to talk about screening and especially due diligence. So how do you include AI ethics in due diligence? The work that I've done to do this, so this is a result, you might wonder, what is the context for this talk? What do I get out of this? The answer, this is a research project that I've done, funded by Notre Dame, IBM Tech Ethics Lab, and in collaboration with an organization called Venture ESG. And what I wanted to do is figure out what can investors do. So I went out, talked to a lot of investors, seeing what they have in mind. Also took research from various disciplines, AI ethics, of course, but philosophy, environment, organizational ethics. And so I took it all in and created this. And so this is a process I recommend that investors take if they want to integrate AI ethics in their due diligence process. And so it has 5 steps. First, decide, does the company that you're dealing with right now even require this due diligence? Then evaluate the AI ethic risk that the company presents. So these are steps 2 and 3. Then evaluate the maturity level of that company when it comes to AI ethics, and then figure out your next steps. And this is research that is pretty much done, but not completely done. So if you have any feedback, please do reach out. Let me know. I'd be very happy to hear any feedback and hopefully improve. There's always room for improvement. But today I'm going to talk about this. Let's start with the first step. How do you decide whether a company even needs this due diligence? And the reason I'm emphasizing this question is because it can be difficult to answer for a few reasons. First, we don't have a universally accepted definition of what AI is. We just don't have that. There's a lot of controversy around that. And the investor's job is not made any easier by the fact that companies will often say that they're using AI because they think it makes them more attractive. And this is something I hear a lot from investors, right? Like the company will say that they have AI, actually they don't, and they never will. And so we don't have a definition, but companies say that they do, even if like investor thinks that they don't. And then another problem, companies that don't think of themselves as AI companies may be using AI anyway, because remember, it's something that is using back office. So like the company might be like a retail company, but they may rely a lot on AI, but the investor might think, oh, this is a retail company. So what I recommend is you could choose a definition of AI. For example, the EU AI Act that I mentioned, they have a definition of AI. You could use that if you want, but don't stop there. I say broaden it a little bit and think about data, because the way that the AI is done today, it needs a lot of data. So if the company processes a lot of data, to me, that's enough. So think about, be broad, like, does it actually use AI in like one of the major definitions that you can like find online? Or is it now, or is it in the future going to process a lot of data? Because of course, some of the companies are early stage, they don't have that yet, but you can see that this is a business model. So you need to do an AI due diligence when the company either develops or uses AI, or when it's going to process a lot of data, especially if this is sensitive data about like people. Okay, now, suppose you decide that the company does need this due diligence. What do? First step, evaluate the risk. And there are 2 kinds of risks that I recommend paying attention to. One is a risk stemming from the kind of application that it is. Like, what is the thing that this AI is supposed to be doing? And here we have the help of the EU AI Act. So the EU AI Act hasn't passed yet, but the expectation is that it will pass and even may come into effect as early as 2024, 2025. So this is coming. We should pay attention. What is this regulation doing? It's dividing AI applications to 4 kinds of risk categories. There's the unacceptable category. These are applications that are going to be prohibited in the European Union. There's high risk applications. They are going to be heavily regulated. There are applications that are going to have transparency obligations, but not as highly regulated. And there are applications who are not going to have any regulation. So this is the structure that they have, and we can use that. So here I have this brief summary of them, and I can, you can find online like, greater details. So unacceptable risk, for example, is applications that do subliminal manipulation of people, that exploit vulnerabilities, that do social scoring, that for public authorities, biometric IDs for law enforcement. All of these things are going to be prohibited. High risk category is applications that are going to be deployed in high risk areas, say infrastructure, cars, stuff like that. And also applications that are going to be used as safety components in a list that they have, like toys, again, things that could be dangerous. Transparency is all applications that interact with humans, for example, a chatbot, applications that are doing emotion detection, and applications that are doing deepfakes. They're all going to have transparency requirements. Everything else is not going to be regulated. So first step to evaluate the risk, figure out where what is this AI supposed to be doing, and where is it on this scale? And again, this is, as I said, going to be research. So soon in the next couple of months, hopefully I'll have like a public version of this written out, and I'm like detailing like all of the specific things, but you can also find it. The EU AI Act has a website, you can find it there. Okay. Next step. It is good to evaluate the risk associated with the type of AI, but it's actually not enough, because within each category, there are so many different kinds. So we need to take a closer look. And one way to do it is to choose specific risk areas that you care about as an investor, and think about what this specific company or AI system is doing with this area. And you can find a lot of AI ethics principles online. A lot of big organizations have them, like tech companies like IBM has one, Google has one, OECD has one, UNESCO has one, many countries have them. You can choose one of those, or you can form it yourself. But if you want to take something as default, here are 4 risk areas you can take as default. It's based on a study that surveyed like a lot of AI ethics principles, and I created a condensed version of them. So this is condensed, but feel free to create yourselves your own risks that you care about as an investor, given your circumstances, given your values, but choose them in advance and then decide on a list of questions for each of those risk areas that you can evaluate a company on those. So I chose those as, if people want a default, they can go for that. Fairness and non-harm is one of the huge risks when it comes to AI. Remember that AI is doing things at scale. So when it does discrimination, it is discrimination at scale. Like think tens, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people. We want to prevent that. And so think about, how can this technology cause harm? Red team it in your head. And specifically, are there ways that this technology can replicate and exacerbate social inequalities? This is like a big picture question to ask yourselves. And in the paper, that I'm writing about this, I'm gonna have I have a list of like more detailed questions that can help you, but you can also write it yourselves. Okay. Second thing, transparency and explainability are huge things that are risky when it comes to AI. So ask yourselves, what would happen, red team it in your head. What would happen if this AI doesn't disclose when it interacts with people, how it makes decisions, and what content it generated? Like, how bad would it be? How big is the risk? Third category, data protection, privacy, and other things. So what would happen if the data that this company is gonna collect or is collecting is leaked, hacked, abused? If it's not collected consensually, or if it's inaccessible to the data subjects, what would happen? What are the risks? Fourth category, autonomy and control. What would happen if no one can intervene on the actions of this AI? Who would be harmed? How could they be harmed? Ask yourselves these questions and then categorize them, like decide for each of those risk areas. Is it high risk for fairness? Is it medium risk for data protection? Okay, so after you've done that, you have 2 ways of thinking of the risk that this company or AI application presents. But the fact that there is risk doesn't necessarily mean we don't need to invest, right? Because the company might be mitigating those risks. So the next step is determine the company's AI ethics maturity. What are they doing to deal with those risks? And so there are 3, I divided to 3 categories. Knowledge. What do they do? how much are they familiar with the risks and how they pertain to their company? And do they have a game plan? It's basically it. Workflow. What are they doing to actually integrate their knowledge into their day-to-day work? And oversight. What are they doing to keep themselves accountable? And I recommend that you score the companies, from beginner to advanced. And it doesn't, companies at different stages, it's going to mean different things for them, but a pre-seed company can be advanced in AI ethics. It's just that my expectations for them are going to be different than my expectations of an enterprise when it comes to, so I'm going to, this is again, something that I have a more detailed version that I can get into later. And will be available publicly soon. But like the point is, for example, with knowledge, right? So from an advanced company, I'm expecting to be familiar with the impacts, to use diverse inputs, to spread the knowledge, and to have clear standards and metrics. It's just that those things are going to mean different things depending on the stage of development. For example, if this is a pre-seed company, so basically a person with an idea, sit down, familiarize yourself with their risks. There are many things that they can do. Diverse input, while you're doing customer discovery anyway, you could, as a part of that, hear concerns relating to the negative impacts that your AI could have. So this is something that you could integrate in your processes and learn. For an advanced company, of course, I'm going to be, sorry, for like an enterprise, they could do more things. They could do surveys, they could do research. So any company could be advanced. It just depends on the stage of development. Okay, but I'm also going to move on in the interest of time. So altogether, this is a score, a scorecard that you can have, right? What is the risk level of the application type? What are the application specific risks and what is the level of risk in each one? And then what is the AI ethics maturity of the company? Again, relative to the stage of development in each of those things. This gives you an overview of the company, and you can use it to inform your decision-making. Next step is, how is it going to inform your decision-making? Well, yeah. I mean, of course, you're going to be looking at many other things, not just AI ethics, but you could, at the end of the day, decide to reject the company. It's good to have guidelines in advance. For example, you could have this policy that if the application type risk is unacceptable, so it's going to be prohibited by the EU eventually, you might just have, a policy to like always reject them. You could have them if you want it. Like, I don't know. It all depends on your, risk preferences, other circumstances, but consider deciding in advance what your policy is going to be. Second thing, which I always recommend, provide ethics maturity support to all companies. And this could mean access to experts. It could mean give workshops to, facilitate, like get someone to give a workshop to all of your portfolio companies, right? Have someone on standby, because most of them, especially early stages, you're not going to need someone full time, but they are likely going to need someone to ask questions from time to time. You can provide that. Another thing you could decide to do is external audit. As investors, we do not have, we cannot be experts in every single thing we invest in. But sometimes knowing whether the company is responsible and whether the product is responsible is going to require that kind of expertise. So in some cases, you could recommend or require an external audit, especially if you discover, say, that fairness is a high risk area, but the company's maturity is low. That might be a reason to do an external audit. And in some cases, you might be tempted to say, actually, it's fine. We're good to go, like nothing else. But I recommend to never do that. Because things always change as the company grows, as things change, as new regulation comes out. So I recommend to always at least provide ethics maturity support. Okay, so this is my last slide. This is my summary, so get ready. Any questions? This is what I wanted to say today. I wanted to say today that AI is actually, it's not a niche field, as it's easy to think about that because of the way that it's portrayed in media, but actually it's already a part of most tech companies, and it's very likely to be a part of the vast majority of them, if not all of them. And I say tech companies, but actually it might be just all companies, period. And it can be really helpful. That's why it's, that's why the adoption is so high. It's versatile, it's effective. But the thing is, if we don't do it properly, it can be dangerous, and it can be dangerous at scale because it's going to affect masses of people at the same time. Or like the carbon emissions could be like really high. So yeah, we should pay attention to it, especially as investors, if you ask me. And not only because of the social and environmental performance, but also because of the financial performance. And investors can do a lot of things. It goes beyond due diligence, but today I focus specifically on due diligence, and I created this 5-step process. Remember, decide if the company needs an AI due diligence. They may not call themselves an AI company, but they might still need it. Think about the risks of the application type, the risks that are specific to this application. Then think of the AI ethics maturity level of the company, and then be thoughtful when you decide on your next steps. Yeah, so that's the framework that I have now. Please, any feedback that you have, feel free to reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk about this. I plan to, as I said, soon have like a more detailed public version of this. And yeah, happy to jump into Q&A.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Ravit. That was fascinating. And I think it's something that more and more investors are going to need to learn. So I'm just going to kick off before we go into, we've got some great questions here. I've got some questions for you. I'm just going to ask Annabelle to come on and talk a little bit about how this topic relates to our courses that we run. Annabelle.
Hi, thanks very much, Ravit. That was really, really interesting. And thanks everyone for taking the time out of their days to attend. So some of you probably know Orny runs this fantastic program at the end of October called Impact Finance Innovations, which is really looking to, where the space is headed. So actually taking away these traditional forms of investing and financing and thinking a little bit outside the box and to do things a little bit more nuanced with the entrepreneur in mind. I'll just pop in the chat the link to the program if you wanted to take a look. We are still taking applications for the next month or so. So if anyone's interested in finding out more, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll put my email address in the chat as well. Really happy to have a chat to see if you think it might be an interesting fit for you to come and you'd like to learn too. We will also be sharing this webinar on YouTube, and we'll send out an email with the link to it, as well as any kind of helpful resources that Ravit has shared today with you. So if you've missed out, or you've got people that you'd like to share this recording with, no problem at all. We'll be sending it out to you in a few weeks' time.
Thanks so much. And yeah, do join us. It's the course is fantastic and has lots of deep dives like this. So Ravit, I'm actually going to go ahead. There's a bunch of questions popping up that are quite good. So I think, yes, Bruno, we'll send you the presentation in a couple of weeks once we've got the transcript and everything in the webinar, the recording already. So you will get that in a follow-up email. So I'm going to start actually with Jeffrey's question, Ravit, around is there a correlation in the maturity score to the ethics or the ethos that founders carry? So if the score is beginner, is that a lack of concern for ethical behavior? So I think he's asking about when you're evaluating, obviously, these opportunities, investment opportunities.
Yeah, okay. So here's how I'm understanding the question, and tell me if I'm understanding it correctly. The founder might be motivated to care about AI ethics specifically. And so I think the question is there a correlation between this motivation that the founder has and what we're seeing in the company itself? Is that right?
Is that what you're asking? Jeffrey, is that what you're asking? That's how I understood it as well.
Okay. Okay. So I don't have data specifically.
Unethical. Oh, interesting. Could it also be unethical? Could the founders be unethical? Ooh, that's interesting. So is this a way to potentially suss out whether or not the founders themselves are ethical? That's very interesting.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to divide my answer. So okay. I don't have data. Like I don't have quantitative data specifically about their motivation could be purely money versus good. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, so as I was saying, yeah, I don't have concrete quantitative data about AI ethics specifically, but there is research about responsible innovation more generally, which I see ethics as maybe a part of or inherently related to responsible innovation. And research shows that the main reason that SMEs do responsible innovation is because of the motivation of the founders. So like, it's possible that like some of them do it for other reasons, of course, but anecdotally, what I've seen is that people who go into it specifically in AI ethics, it's because they're seeing both. I haven't seen yet someone who's only doing it for one reason, either founders or investors. It's because they see the social and environmental concern and also the financial aspect. So I personally have only seen it happen both times. Having said that, as we are seeing more and more regulation arising, I suspect that we will see people who do it only for the money or only for the compliance aspect. That it just makes sense. Like what, once we, because, some people think that the EU AI Act can pass, as soon as like November. So it's soon. And once once this happens, it's just like with GDPR, they just do it because they have to. And so it won't be like that indication about the intentions of the founder. So I think, and also it's really easy to care, just like in other fields, it's really easy to care, but then when push comes to shove, not do it. So I think diagnosing the motivation of the founder can be helpful, but it's not enough, like especially in AI ethics, because what's going on today in the AI ethics world, a lot of companies, they come up with like ethical principles and they'll put it on like their website, but then like nothing will come of it. And so
which we see with the SDGs, right? People put all the colorful SDGs up on their websites and then, oh, look at all these things that we do, but it's actually not embedded in. So it's very, I think it's absolutely very similar.
I mean, sometimes it's not even intentional. Like I think in the case specifically of AI ethics, I think it's almost like a trend right now. And also a part of why I'm doing this research is because I think some of it is because people don't know how to bridge that gap. They're not sure how to apply it. So sometimes I think it's for innocent reasons. But yeah, like the risk is of ethics
washing. I like that ethics washing, Jeffrey. I think it could be a thing.
Yeah.
And Siddharth wants to know, Ravi, is if you see a role for legal consulting in this process. Is there a legal sector that's going to start working on this?
There is, and we must have it, like because there are laws. Like we need lawyers to guide us through this, but especially because the legal landscape is complicated because different jurisdictions have not only different laws, but completely different approaches. And so it's tricky to figure out, how I want to be compliant in all the countries I work with, but it's not straightforward figuring out how to do that. So we do have, I'm seeing like more and more lawyers sometimes reaching out to me and saying, hey, like I want to get into this field, like I want to learn more. So I think it's something that is going to arise. However, I think that it's really important when we engage, for example, with founders. Yes, the legal aspect is important, but not to emphasize only that, because then it could easily turn to, just like checklist mentality.
Yep.
That isn't helpful. And also because there's a difference between what's legal and what's ethical. And we want to make sure that, especially as impact investors, that we're leaving a lot of room to grow beyond the legal requirements.
And I see that a lot when I work, because I work a lot in emerging markets, and there's a lot that's legal, from whether it's in how AI is processing data, how you're collecting identity data, how you're storing data, that is legal in some countries that do not have strong transparency laws, or not transparency laws. Well, transparency is helpful, but strong privacy laws. But I think that it's a very short-sighted investor or founder that essentially, designs to that legality as opposed to, and I think that's something that, we see. And I like that. One of the things I really like about your work is that it really provides some structure, because, we know someone, in response to this webinar, someone had asked me like, can you be an unethical impact investor in tech? And the answer is absolutely yes, right? I mean, there are a lot of different ways in which investors often unknowingly are investing in companies that have a great purpose, but aren't necessarily applying the technology in a way that in the long term is actually going to create benefit. And so I think that, when we're thinking about legality versus purpose versus motivation, it's important to make sure those align. But I think what the work that you're doing is trying to make a framework to ask these questions in a very specific way. And I think that's where we're moving in the impact investing space, is away from kind of, well, I think we're all doing good, I think we're all trying to make the world a better place, to, this is what best practice looks like. These are the right types of questions that you need to ask. This is the type of answer that you need to get to make this a good investment. And I think and Holger says we should include the lawyers and DD as well. So absolutely, lawyers should be involved in the due diligence. And then Arjun, actually, sorry, I'm going to follow up with this. Anonymous attendee has asked us if there are specialized consultants or service providers that are supporting investors around external audits, around ethics or due diligence.
Yeah. Okay. So on my website, I have a resource page, and on that page, I have a tab for tools. What I put there is free and nonprofit resources to help specifically with AI ethics. Most organizations don't target investors specifically, but they can support investors as well. And I've divided all of the services there on my tools page to the 3 categories that I mentioned: knowledge, workflow, and oversight. So if you want an external audit, that's on the oversight. If you want someone to be looking into how the company, the AI ethics maturity, yes, exactly that. Thank you for sending that link. Then you can find it on their workflow. For investors specifically in AI ethics, that's why I got into this, because I noticed that there's a gap. There are people that can help, but not very few. And there aren't enough resources that make AI ethics accessible to an investor audience, which is the reason for this whole project, that I noticed this gap. And specifically, by the way, I started this project from the lens of impact investing, because we noticed the gap with impact investors is sometimes they're unsure of how to take the impact investing lens and apply it to technology.
Yep.
So there are a lot of gaps. For me, this is exactly, I'm a huge believer in the power of investors to change the entire ecosystem. I really believe in that. So when I noticed this lack of resources, I'm like, well, I can have a contribution here, and this is important.
Well, and I think making those resources available is such an important part. So thank you for doing that. I'm looking at your website now, and the tools, I didn't even see that page before. It's really useful. And Jeffrey says he's a For Humanity certified auditor at Children's Code. So there we go. Yeah. Oh, I like that. Holger says laws, policy, ethics is not. That is the difference. That is a great way to say that, Holger. Arjun has a broad question, and I think you touched on it a little bit, but I think it's diving more into the slide when you talked about the use of AI for the SDGs. So how, what are some of the, I'm assuming, Arjun, you're asking what are some of the things that you're seeing around how AI is being used to advance the SDGs.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. There's so many. Okay. One application that I've heard of is, okay, so you want to have an entire city, suppose, and you're thinking of the energy supply to the entire city, and you want that energy supply, at least some of it to be from green sources. You need to decide how to, I'm not sure how to say it, but how much energy you need where at what times. You need to be able to control that. This is something that people can do with AI. So we can make more informed decisions on energy distribution, especially when we're combining, green, clean energy with, dirty energy, coal-based energy, say. And yeah, so this is just one application, I guess, that came to mind to me spontaneously now. But
Another one that I'm seeing,
Yeah.
Ravit, is the use of artificial intelligence and even potentially going into machine learning around impact measurement. So some of these large data sets that we're using, I'm actually here in Cape Town, there's a great example of a few that are trying to get there. I think one of the things that has hampered the impact measurement space is that the data is not very good. So you can run, you can run an algorithm on terrible data and you're not really going to get anything good on the other side. So a lot of the work, I know myself, when I first went into, trying to build an AI prototype on essentially impact measurement and impact finance data 6 years ago now, one of the biggest things I found was just that there wasn't enough good data. And so one of the things I've seen in the past few years is the shift really being towards these tech organizations trying to actually create good data. I think a lot of people like myself was like, why aren't we just using this technology to be able to parse the data? And then we realized that none of it was clean. None of it was collected correctly. There was, and so I think that what's happened in the past kind of, I would say 5 to 6 years, and particularly in the past 2 to 3 years, has been the collection of better data from a measurement perspective. And then we're moving towards the opportunity to potentially use AI in that. And then one more I'll say, and then I'm sure you have a ton of examples. I'm starting to see quite some interesting AI applications actually around sourcing of deals, of impact deals. And now again, Arjun, this isn't on the specific issue area, but I'm kind of talking on the plumbing of impact investing plumbing. But being able to, for instance, scrape local news sites, look at things around university publications, ways in which digging deeper into networks globally that investors just really struggle to get into, and being able to essentially run algorithms on some of that data. And I think that's quite interesting, because we often talk about how difficult it is to, source and find impact deals, particularly at the local level. And so local languages, being able to look, natural language processing and local languages. So those are a couple that I'm seeing that get me excited.
Yeah. I like all of your examples.
So Arjun has another question for us, and and then I think we'll finish off with some final thoughts. So I don't know if it's a question or a comment. We can differentiate between 3 perspectives: utilitarian, legal, and moral around energy distribution. That's interesting, because I have to think, one of the things, I just got back from the States for a couple of months, and my husband and I are both saying we live in South Africa, and we're just saying the level of energy consumption in the US just absolutely boggles our minds compared to, the levels that we see everywhere else, but mostly, in emerging markets that we spend most of our time in. And so there is a really interesting kind of argument to be made when we're thinking about, energy distribution globally, but also within kind of cities and unequal areas. So yeah, it's actually a fascinating comment, Arjun. That's very interesting. All right, so Ravi, do you want to finish off? What are your thoughts? And I would ask you specifically to think about where are we going? Where are we going, and where would you like us to be going? Because those might not be the same directions.
Okay. Okay. I want to answer this. I also want to address something that came up earlier in some of the comments. Do we want to include lawyers in the due diligence? It's not, I don't have an answer to this, but I want to say a part of the gap that I'm seeing, a lot of the conversations in AI ethics revolve around companies that have a finished product. So they would say, do you have a diverse data set? Or questions like that, which are excellent questions to ask when you have a product, but sometimes you don't have it yet. And I find that this is a great time to start thinking of AI ethics. I think when companies are at that stage, they will often say, this is too early for us. It is the exact opposite. It's exactly the right time. Because and I think that founders should start thinking about this from day one. Because if they don't, there's a risk of them identifying it too late. Right? They need to see what's coming so that when it happens, that they can identify it. So it starts with educating themselves. And then I think when we engage with companies, at that stage, like pre-seed or seed, it might be too early for the lawyers because we don't even know what the product is gonna do exactly. And we know for sure it's gonna change, like maybe even like a million times. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but like, so when we involve the lawyers, like we could do that and we should do that many times, but also we shouldn't forget about those very early stages because it actually really matters in those stages, because otherwise it's going to be it's not going to be too late. Like you can always do it, but it's going to be way more expensive, you know, and even, you know, like I work with like seed companies even, and they have a product already. And now we have to like go back to the product that already exists. Well, if we had started before when it was like pre-seed, it would have been incremental. It would have been less expensive. We would not have needed the lawyers also, maybe, because like to do what? Like there's no product. So I just like wanted to say yes and to that.
Okay, good.
Okay. And so you were saying, yeah, where are we going? My dream. I want to see AI ethics being top of mind for investors, because I do believe this is a technology that is going to be integrated in potentially every single company. I would like, you know, I wish, and I'm working towards creating it, a movement around it, you know, an excitement, a FOMO feeling. For, you know, and I think with investors, like one way to divide them is you know, impact investors, ESG, and like none of the above. That's one way to divide them. And they all have like different kinds of motivations and like ways that they do things. And I think it should be a part of all of them. So I want to see investors who are impact investors thinking, as an impact investor, it is crucial for me to think of AI ethics. I want to say investors who are on the ESG bandwagon, but not the impact investing bandwagon, saying, as an ESG investor, it is crucial for me to think of AI ethics. And I want to see the none of the above investors saying, as an investor, period, it is crucial for me to think of AI ethics. That's what I would want to see, because I mean, I think a part of it is understanding AI differently. It's not just this futuristic thing gonna like be like a human overlord, like maybe, but also it's in IT. And the negative harms are, you know, the scale is scary. Like when you see some of the case studies that you see just like masses of people being harmed, and like the environmental impacts, like we cannot risk this. I think we are at a crucial and like such an exciting time in AI ethics, because I think we are currently at a turning point, and it's kind of like, it's up to us, you know, how this technology will impact the world. And as investors, you know, we are at such a special place because we are shaping, you know, which technologies are actually going to be created. And so huge responsibility comes with that power, in my opinion.
All right, we're going to have to end up. There's a great question that was just thrown in that we're not going to have time to answer around AI ethics within human rights, and how should they be embedded within human rights, DD, which, you know, I think they absolutely should be. Unfortunately, we are at time, but Ravi, thank you so much. Fascinating conversation. I love the structure that your work is putting to this, to a topic that can be incredibly wide-ranging and, you know, very philosophical in a negative way, i.e. we're not getting to, you know, actual concrete actions. And I think what you're doing is you're bringing us to that point of concrete actions and frameworks that are incredibly important. So thank you everyone for joining us. This was a great conversation, and Ravi's work is just, you know, I think fascinating in this regard. And so please continue the excellent work. Really, really appreciate it. And we'll see everyone very soon. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye.